Hey, this is Ricky Kalmon, and welcome to another episode of Amplify Your Mindset. As always, thank you so much for listening. And if you're fortunate enough to watch this on video, we are starting to introduce the video portion of this podcast. And thank you. Greatly appreciate it. And I really do. I mean, I love these text messages through social media and emails from people saying, just thanks. This was inspirational. Even this morning, somebody reached out to me and said, I was listening to your podcast because I happened to look up that person and noticed that they're on your podcast. So what a great connection right there. So we hope that we're sharing valuable information. Every podcast that you can find a better version of yourself, maybe help your team, your organization grow. And that's what this is all about. And I really do appreciate your time because time is valuable these days. And I know there's just one more thing on your plate. So let's get right to the show today. My guest today is Phillip Van Hooser. Phillip is a very unique guy because he's been in the business, he knows the business, and he's pivoted in so many different ways in which I'm really excited about finding out more a little bit about him. He is a leadership speaker, trainer, consultant, coach. He has so much more to offer though, because it's unique in what he does is not just giving a speech, he gives content, real things that you can be using and help you become a great leader and help your organization grow. Because it is a for-profit business. It is about growing and it's about making a great organization. And he's standing by and he helps companies improve performance through engaged leaders. So let's just jump right into it. Phillip, welcome to the program.
Ricky, thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this.
I have too. I had a great, I'm going to tag this. I had a great opportunity to have your daughter-in-law on the show who you've welcomed into your business, and Allison, who just wrote a great book. And so this was actually a pleasure too, to have you on. And, even off air, you were sharing, you were in the HR business for years. So how did this change for you? Where did you see yourself now? And did you see yourself going into the business of training and helping?
Well, it's interesting. Just this morning, I had an opportunity to be online with a college class in Iowa, University of Iowa college class. And I know the instructor, and they asked if I would spend some time with the students. And I said, yeah. And they asked the similar question. How did I transition? Did I ever see this going, et cetera? The answer is, yes, I did see it, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. When I was a young boy, even as early as age 8 years old, I already knew I wanted to be a speaker, and I already knew I wanted to have my own business. And that's as far as it went. I didn't have any models or mentors for that. It just seemed like people who could talk and share and who could make things happen on their own were exciting. But of course, you have to make a living. And so when I came out of college, I had the opportunity to go into manufacturing, corporate manufacturing, and HR specifically. And in those years that I spent on the plant floors and working with frontline supervisors and all the rest, I learned just how desperately needed leadership development, leadership training, and, as you mentioned, engaged leadership is to the overall performance and success of a company. It's not about, pipe dreams. The things happen through people, and people are led by leaders. And so as I saw the deficiencies, even in my own companies that I worked for, I realized that maybe that's my niche. Maybe that's something I could do. And so I dedicated myself to learning and growing as a leader, and ultimately then began to be able to share with others who also embraced that learning and growing attitude. And now, 40 years from the time I entered the work world and 32 years as a full-time professional speaker, trainer, author, coach, consultant, all the things that you said, it's been a wonderful ride.
I have a question for you, and I do ask a lot of my friends that speak on this topic. And maybe it's more of just a statement itself. Every leader is unique. Every leadership, there's no perfect plan. There is no perfect leader. But you kind of tagged on this, and I truly believe, and this is something we share in common, is that leadership is a self-discovery process. Leadership and spills over not only to our corporate life, but also to our own personal lives. What do you think that when you have a leader that doesn't think that they need to change, which is a challenge, because that's the type of person you probably really want in your room. Yes, you love the idea that somebody wants to grow and they understand that self-discovery never ends, and you know that they're craving for information like a magnet. They want to just, come on, make me a better leader. But then you get somebody that is, why am I here? This is a waste of time. Why does this guy doesn't know more than what I know? Why should I listen to him? Which again, I think that that's the person I want to talk to. How do you start with something like that?
Well, first of all, none of us like to change. I mean, we may say we do, but for the most part, once we get comfortable in the way we think, the way we act, the way we live, the way we interact with, etc., once we find that comfort zone, we pretty much want to stay there. And so anytime someone, be it an outsider like me as a speaker or trainer or consultant, whatever, comes in and says there's a better way, there's immediately that pushback for the vast majority of the people. And that's understandable. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But oftentimes I will pose this question to my audiences. I said, how many of you would like to learn a particular leadership style and just stay there, continue to do that for the balance of your professional career? And, you know, usually almost all hands go up. And I said, okay, how many of you have seen the employees, especially if you've been in the workplace, let's say for 10 years, certainly 40 years, but 10 years. I said, have you seen the employees change? Oh, yeah, the new generation, and they just go on and on and on. I say, okay, that's the reason you have to change as a leader. See, most leaders who get comfortable expect followers. That's what I talk about, the leader-follower relationship. Most leaders who have gotten comfortable in their positions want, hope, even expect that the followers will adapt and adjust to them. They won't. If they can't adapt, if they can't relate to their leader, they'll simply find another path. They'll go someplace else, either internal to the company. They'll leave this supervisor to try to transfer to another department or whatever. Or more often, they'll even leave the company altogether. So what I tell people, I tell leaders, as long as followers are changing, you need to be changing as well. Not necessarily to match the followers, but for the followers to understand you're trying to lead them under their unique and individual circumstances. That's kind of the 30,000 foot view of it all. But really, that's what I talk about. Leadership styles change because followers change, not because some new book was written or because there's some new theory that's being espoused throughout the work world. It's because employees that we're leading are changing, and therefore we've got to stay one step, two steps ahead of them in that process.
It's interesting. You know, and that process never ends. It's a constant evolving thing for not only the leader, but the employees at all levels of the corporation or organization. You know, and I find that there are people that aren't perfect. You know, they admit that they're not perfect. There are people that look at things of training as somewhat maybe is training a waste of time. And I don't, you know, again, you and I are in the world of no, not at all. But when you have somebody and they are not engaged, what do you think? Again, I know I can't ask you to give away the farm here because we don't have time for that. What do you think your biggest challenge is when somebody's not engaged? How do you get them engaged?
You know, it happens a lot, Ricky. You know it does. People are forced to go to a training program. They feel like it's punishment in some way. I'll even hear the words enunciated. Well, why should I be here? Why shouldn't my boss, or why shouldn't he or she or they or someone else be there? And the only thing I can say to that really is that my job, if I bring into that particular environment an attitude that my job is to help you grow or to help you do your job better or to help you be more comfortable in what you're already doing.
Right.
I want to show them that I'm not a threat, but that I'm a resource or even a coach or a mentor to them through those difficult areas that they may not relate. But let's face it, I've gone to training programs as a participant that it was totally a waste.
Right.
It was totally a waste because it had no relevance to me. It had no application opportunity. The person who was talking to me, more appropriately, talking at me, was just trying to, check the box. All right, I did my 8 hours, or I did my 2 hours today, or in front of an audience, or whatever. I try not to do that. And I think the best leadership trainers, and frankly, I think the best trainers in general, are the ones that try to make this experience as real and as practical for the individuals that have come and invested their time. I heard someone say one time that if I, a speaker, if you, a speaker, go to a presentation and it doesn't go well, let's say you did your 1 hour, I did my 1 hour, or 5 hours, whatever it may be, and they say it didn't go well, well, that was a wasted 5 hours or wasted 1 hour. Well, it really wasn't. I multiply that by the number of people that were in the audience. If you had 100 people in that audience and you wasted your hour and they didn't get anything out of it, that's a wasted 100 hours, or multiplied thereby. And so I always go into the engagement thinking, how can I make something productive happen out of it? That aligns itself, quite frankly, with my definition for leadership, which I haven't shared, but if you're interested in hearing that, maybe that would also be enlightening somehow.
Jump in.
All right. My definition, and you know, if you read a leadership book or any 100 leadership books, you're probably going to get 100 different leadership definitions. This one happens to be mine. It's not something I borrowed from someone. It's something that I crafted over the past 32 years of working with leaders. My definition consists of 2 factors, but before you know what the 2 factors are, you need to know what leadership is not. And I very specifically say leadership is not position. It's not position. It's not determined by a title. It's not determined by where your office is located. It's not determined by how long you've been in something and therefore you're an emeritus whatever. That's not leadership. I'm not taking anything away from that. I mean, managers and vice presidents and whatever, all more power to them, because I know that that also takes dedicated effort and energy and some sort of performance standard for them to be able to reach that level. But that's not leadership. There are people, you know people, and I know people who right now we're thinking they may be a manager, supervisor, whatever, but they'll never be a leader because we have already determined in our mind what that means. So what does it mean? For me, this is what leadership means. Leadership is the ability to offer service. I'll come back to that one in just a second. The ability to offer service and the willingness to take action. Now, put those 2 together. From a customer service standpoint, service is about meeting and exceeding the expectations of our customers. I think all of us would pretty much agree with that. If the people who are servicing our needs meet our expectations, exceed our expectations, we're going to be happy as we can be. We'll probably come back. We'll tell our friends about it. We'll take that same concept and apply it to the leader-follower relationship. Instead of customer and customer service provider, we have leader and follower. So if the leader meets and or exceeds the expectations of his or her followers, we're already on a great path. And make no mistake about it, every follower has expectations of their leader. Now, I don't think every leader recognizes those expectations or accepts those expectations, but they're there. So the second thing is, once we know what their expectations are, the ability to offer service and the willingness to take action, to do something. This morning, I told you I was talking to those students, and it was a communications class, and even more specifically, they said today they wanted me to talk about delivering difficult news, difficult messages. I said it takes 3 things. You have to have a plan. You have to communicate that plan very clearly, with great clarity, and then you have to execute on the plan. If any one of those 3 ingredients is missing, if you don't have a plan and you just start communicating, shooting from what I say the hip, or more specifically, shooting from the lip, you're going to make a mistake.
Right.
You're not going to execute well. On the other hand, if you have a plan and communicate that plan well, but then don't execute, people go, what's the deal? They got us all jacked up for nothing. So I say, relative to those people, you talked about those people who are unwilling or hesitant to receive leadership training. If you show them, we're going to create a plan, I'm going to communicate, I'm going to show you how to execute it, all of a sudden now we've given them value that for the most part, many people never learn those 3 unique skills, but it becomes necessary. And we do it by way of my leadership definition I shared.
You know, you sparked a bunch of things going through my thoughts when you said this. One of them was a great validation of what I think is so important when somebody does sit in the audience, whether you speaking on leadership, myself speaking on mindset, is that, listen, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, and I'm not going to walk in your shoes. And I love the way you validated this. I just want to share with you something. And if your time with me is you get something out of this, whether it is a phrase, whether it's an analogy, a skill, a trait, a story that resonates with you, it's worth everything to me. That's all I'm asking from you today. I'm not trying to, listen, I'm an expert in my field, but you're an expert in your field. And if I can collaborate with you and share with you something, wow, you walk away with something, and maybe I might learn too. So this is not an ego thing. This is a sharing thing. And then I love the way you started that out by saying, you know, leave your titles, you know, if that's fair enough to say, just, it's not a title, it's a service, you know, it's what you do.
Ricky, you talk a lot to your audiences about leveraging mindset, and mindset is just as critical in the leadership environment as it is anywhere else. And I would even argue maybe even more so than in some other areas, because if you don't see yourself as a leader, you probably won't be a leader. Yep. You know, several years ago, I decided I was going to buy a motorcycle. Okay. But I'd never ridden a motorcycle. And I'm smart enough to know that I don't want to get out on the roads riding a motorcycle unless I, you know, have the necessary, the requisite skills. So I took a motorcycle driving class, and it was wonderful. Anybody that was thinking about driving a motorcycle that's never had that experience, I recommend they do that. But the motorcycle instructor said something that I've never forgotten, that not only applied when I was on two wheels, but on basically in every other aspect of my life as well. This is what he said. He said, now remember, not just to me, but to the class. He said, now remember, when you get on that motorcycle, you will steer where you stare. And I didn't understand it at first. He said, if you happen to be one of these that like to gaze off to the left or gaze off to the right as you're riding that motorcycle, he said, whether you know it or not, your body will shift, and the motorcycle, being very responsive, will go in that direction. He said, so if you can just remember, you're going to steer where you stare. You need to stare at what's in front of you, what's coming up, because that's where the steering. Well, isn't that true for mindset? Isn't that true for leadership? We steer where we stare.
Right. And I'm going to add something to that, because I think what you're saying too. It's not looking, you're staring. I think that's the key word, is staring. Exactly right. There's okay to look in different directions. That's what you're there for, is to make sure that nothing's getting in your way or kind of anticipating change. But what are you staring at? Are you staring at your team? Are you staring at your vision or your purpose, your mission, your culture, your clients? What vision do you have? I think that's a fantastic, I'm going to remember this from this podcast. See, you were teaching each other. The teachers are teachers.
Well, it's important that we do that, because iron sharpens iron. We've got to do that. You know, the other thing I was going to say about your mindset concept is, that's very important to me, is I teach the concept of intentional leadership. You can be a leader, you really can. You can be a leader by being an accidental leader, an incidental leader, or an intentional leader. An accidental leader is someone that stumbles into a situation. They don't realize it, but their basic instincts kick into gear. They say the right thing. They do right thing in the moment, but it's completely accidental and probably will never happen again, because the circumstance won't present itself.
Right.
The incidental leadership is an incident that happens, and you know what to do in that particular case, but then you try to make every other case similar to that incident, which in fact it won't. It's kind of like the old saying that if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. You know, you're going to try to fix every problem with the same solution as before. But an intentional leader is the one that gets out of the bed in the morning and goes, okay, I don't know what's going to come my way this morning, But there are certain concepts, certain premises, certain truths that I believe to be true to all leaders that I'm going to practice religiously today. And then when the circumstance or when this situation presents itself, I'm already going to be prepared to communicate professionally. I'm already going to be prepared to stay focused, as you said a moment ago, on vision or mission or purpose or whatever. In other words, they already know that regardless of what happens, good or bad today, I'm going to stay focused in my leadership realm, my leadership lane. That's when we become an intentional leader. So even though I may not use the term leverage and mindset the way you do, the reality of it is all good leaders do that in terms of their intentionality behind the actions, the behaviors, the words they speak, etc. It is a mindset that is hard not to have if you're going to be successful.
I absolutely love when an employee, regardless of who they are, even a board member or another associate of the same level, comes to me and says, that person you just talked to, that person you met, or the president of the company, a CEO, whoever it may be, that's a great leader. That's a great leader. And they're not the ones that it's not the sugarcoating ones, the ones that are cheerleading because they're just trying to, make themselves, look like they really care. I'm talking about when an employee really says, you don't know how great of a leader we have until you are in our organization. When you have your team advocating for your success because you're helping them become successful, I think that creates a mindset. Again, that's the type of skills that you teach in your training, I believe. This is the type of culture that you would love, because when your own organization is bragging about what you do, that's everything. I'll share with you very quickly. I think you'll like this story. Phil, I remember, I was calling you Phil. Is that okay, Philip? Or what is it?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Sorry. All right, Philip. I remember one time doing a presentation in Las Vegas, and a friend of mine was in the audience in the back of the room in the sound booth. And the leader of this 600 employee event went into my introduction. And what I noticed was during this, before my introduction, he was doing his, once a year, health of the company.
Right.
And I happen to look at the audience because that's what we do sometimes. I don't know about your patterns or habits, but I look at the audience, I look at the response, it kind of gets me all jazzed up. But what I was seeing was people not paying attention, people talking during his speech, people going up to use the restroom, which that's fine if you have to, but it was a casual movement in the room. And here was a speaker. There wasn't nothing wrong with the sound. There was nothing wrong with the lighting. Everything was there. They were there, but they weren't there. They didn't care. This company was run by somebody, and I would never mention their name, by the company did not respect the leader. And then what validated it was, and I didn't take this personally, he went to go introduce me, and half the audience left. They just left. They got up and left. Had nothing. They didn't care about, because they sat there only because they had to. And when it was done with his speech, they got up and they all left. It's one of the hardest programs I ever had to do, and it still resonates in my head, that I was in that situation. But it taught me so much. It wasn't like a failure. It taught me so much about leadership too. It taught me more about my presentation, how to adapt to change, and I had to very quickly. I had to capture the 250 people that were left in that room, and let them know that I'm there just to engage, then I'm going to share. But I share that story with you because I'm sure we've all met people like that. And you just hope that they do, at some part of their life, become a better leader so they can lead their organization. And that's the position, like you said, you gave great examples, but where you were a leader by accident, and maybe that's what happened with that individual. I don't know, but I hope you can understand why I shared that story, because that's the opposite.
Perfectly. And you can imagine in my situation, because of my topic, I come to talk about leadership. I've seen this happen. I've seen what you've said. I've seen it firsthand. So if your viewers are wondering, is that unique to Ricky? No, it's not, unfortunately. It's out there. But I've also seen this time and time again. I'll be called in to lead a leadership training program or a leadership retreat or a management retreat or something. And the main person, the CEO, the president, the vice president of that division, whatever it may be, will get up in front of the audience and say, okay, we've invested a lot of time, energy, and money on this particular program. This is exceptionally powerful. We've in fact found the best person that we can find to lead this program. This is Phillip Van Hooser. I'm sure you're going to enjoy the next 2-3 hours or the next 2 or 3 days. I'll tell you what, I'll see you at lunch later. And off they go. And you can watch the eyes follow that person out of the room. And I know, now it's not that I can't get them. It's not that we won't have something positive come, but I already know what they're thinking. So this is critical to the organization. This is where our future is going to take us by way of leadership development. And you think you're too good. You think you've got it nailed. You think that this is unnecessary for you. Well, I don't know if I agree with that or not. And unfortunately, so one of the things I've gotten now, as we get a little older, a little grayer hair, a little grayer beard, you get a little more courage to say things. So when I get invited to come to a retreat, I said, now let me just make sure who's going to be in the audience. And they say, well, it'll be our supervisors or whatever. And I said, are you going to be there? Well, we'll be there to introduce you. I said, but are you going to stay for the program? Are you going to show them how important this is by way of your presence? Well, I really wasn't planning to. Do you think that's important? I said, I don't think it's important. I think it's critical. Well, won't that hamper or hinder them somewhat from saying something? Maybe, but if they do, it will be offset by the importance that they saw that you've invested your time, your energy, your money, and not just the company's time, energy, and money, that you've got skin in the game, and therefore it's important. Yeah. Leadership, as much as anything else, is a visual medium. We have to see you doing what you say. We have to see you practicing policy or procedure. We have to see this in practice for us to recognize that this is what a follower, this is what an employee, this is what one of your subordinates is expected to do, because you're practicing it, you're giving us the example. It's just, you get me excited talking about it. I'd love to go into greater depth of detail, but I know you don't have time for that. I hope
this is very valuable.
I'm not talking too mubut
not at all. In fact, hearing you say you have to see leadership versus experience it in some ways, but they both go hand in hand. But I remember one time, and I don't get a chance to, but I remember one time one of my clients had me come and meet his team and visit their location. It was probably about 300 people at this location. And we were walking down the halls. He was introducing me to everybody, and he'd stop. Anybody that was walking by, he stopped. He stopped and he said, and if he didn't know their name, he would say, I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Help me with your name again. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, this is Ricky Kalmon and this is one of our employees. Hi, your name is Phillip. Phillip, good to see you again. I'm so sorry I forgot your name. I promise you the next time we meet, I will remember. I mean, there's 300 people, there's constantly changing. Maybe this is a new employee, but he made it, Phillip, the person, I'm just using that as an example, Steve, whatever, as an example of I'm engaged with you right now on the issue. But here's something also interesting. As we continually walk, there was a piece of paper on the ground, just rolled up, very small. Most of us didn't even notice it, but the leader did. He bent over and picked it up and put it in his pocket and kept walking. And there were other people with us and saw it. Now, I don't think that they were... And
never said a word, I'll bet. Either.
Never said a word about it. Never said that should have been somebody else's job. This is somebody else's responsibility. He never didn't even skip in a step. It just was just seamless as he picked up the piece of paper and kept walking.
Right.
There was so many lessons to be learned by that team there. But I even learned a lesson that this was his home. This was his organization. He took pride in it. This is not a teaching moment. Hey, somebody should have been here. Why was this? It was so engaging for me. We're running short on time, but what I want to do is I want you to tell me a little bit more about your online training, a little bit more about your courses. I'm always telling my listeners that I'm going to put more in your bio, your company, links to your site as well at rickykalmon.com. But as we end this podcast, please engage me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about what you're doing now.
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. Yes, I do on-site, in-person leadership training, speaking, et cetera, but you referenced our online, and I appreciate that. People can learn more by going and visiting leadersoughtoknow.com. That's leaders, plural, ought, O-U-G-H-T, to T-O, know, K-N-O-W. leadersoughttoKnow.com. And it's a very comprehensive learning platform. We have, at this point, somewhere over 150 videos that people can learn from. We have equal number of learning activities. There's discussion boards. It's just a very robust site. If people would be interested in knowing more about that or some other service that we offer, they can reach me, Phil, P-H-I-L, at leadersoughttoKnow.com, or Phil at Van Hooser, my last name.com. Either one will bring it to us. But we'd be more than happy to talk to people, both individuals, but more importantly, we talk to organizations about how to develop their leadership group, their leadership team cohort into being more effective. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to mention that. By the way, on the leadersoughttoKnow.com site, there is a trial course that can be taken if people are interested, just getting a feel for how it all plays out for them. And we'd invite them to do just that.
Well, I actually was on your site earlier today, and I know that there was something that I already clicked, put my email in to get a guide and how things work, and I'm looking forward to checking my email later on. So I know that you are a person of content, and you're willing to let people explore and let them kind of dive in and kind of see what it is. And I thought that was really cool. So you'll see my name go through your system already today.
I look forward to it.
This has been great. I really enjoy it. And I could probably talk to you more often about this because I love this conversation. I think that there's some synergy to making great, people become better at what they do. And I think that I love the path, and I love the idea that you're not just on stage giving a feel-good story. You're about driving people to challenge themselves with questions, giving themselves solutions, and being better versions of themselves.
Thank you. We are blessed to have the opportunity to talk, but even more blessed to have people listen to us and trust us that we can help them. I know you're doing a wonderful job through this podcast, and I'm just very honored to have been a part of it.
Likewise, my friend. Thank you so much.